All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Saturday, May 10th, day before Mother's Day. And finally, in the Northeast, we have the sun. It's been about 2 weeks since I've seen sun, probably. And it's nice to actually see the sun, even though I'm kind of locked up in this dark room. But I have a lot of yard work to do, I'm sure, as many of you do. So I'm not going to make this a long one today. I'm going to try to get through this in 30 to 45 minutes. I know you've heard that from me in the past, but that's our goal today is to try to get done here in 30 to 45 minutes. But we have a lot of good content today. This week was a very exciting week at Nutanix. We had our annual .next conference, and it was extremely exciting to see all of the customers, all of the partners, and of course, all of the innovative announcements along the lines of partnerships and technology innovation, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But you know, really, where Nutanix is going in the last 10 years. So I've been here 10 years actually last week at Nutanix. And when I first started the company, we had HCI running on ESX. Okay. And we were providing storage services, right? And obviously VMware was providing the hypervisor, and we were bringing data close to applications and making data services simple. That was our first introduction to the market and our first product to the market. Okay. And as we see the landscape change and the needs of the customers change, and the simplicity that we provided in the HCI stack, customers came to us and asked for other capabilities. And so that's why you see Nutanix in the last 10 years really move from this HCI company to more of a platform and services company, right? And it's really about delivering this next gen platform that provides freedom of choice, ultimate flexibility, right, and agility, and of course all of the services that you are needing as you move into these next gen applications, next gen services, and of course AI. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Just really quick before we start the content, I talk about this every stream. YouTube seems to have better quality, so if you're on LinkedIn and you want to have a better quality stream and you want to interact with chat, you can do that over on YouTube. And this is the link for today's video down below in the white section here. So I'll just leave this up here for a few seconds. If you guys want to go over to the YouTube channel, you can actually view the stream there. And I believe just by looking at it, you'll get a better quality stream based on the codecs that YouTube has versus LinkedIn. One other thing too, I just want to point out is everything I'm going to talk about is now it's now public knowledge. However, there are some things I'm going to talk about where, I'm not going to talk about dates. I will talk about time frames. I won't talk about specific dates because honestly, with anything with software and innovation and release dates, those things tend to either come early or push, understandably because of challenges or testing or bugs, and those things have to be fixed before we release the software or the services to the public, right? That's what a software company does. And so generally speaking, most things push, unfortunately, but I will give time frames, and these are time frames that were shared at .next. There's nothing new here, and I'm not going to talk about anything that's really forward thinking so much. In a sense, we're going to talk about really what's on the truck now and what's coming in the near future. But again, as these things come out, right, things may change. These things are a lot of these things that I'm talking about are based on partnerships. So these are not guaranteed things to be, you can't stamp it and say, this is exactly what's going to happen. These are really around announcements and innovations that are coming from Nutanix and the partnerships that we're creating. So without getting further into that, let me just hide this really quick, and I'm going to share my screen here. So I'm going to just blow this up a little bit. Hopefully you can see this. So the person to the left here is Rajiv Ramaswamy. He's our CEO, and he came out and really talked about on the opening keynote really the core things that we're going to be focused on today in my talk track and really through the conference. Now, there are other announcements that were spread through that I'm not going to get into. These are the very high level announcements that I'm going to be talking about today. And we're going to focus on 4 key areas. And you can see here to the left these key areas here, right? So the support of the core, right, foundational services when it comes to supporting external storage. We'll talk about more about that. We're going to talk about the ability to integrate applications and security and more partnerships around that. Our expansion into additional hyperscalers, as well as capabilities with our current partners with AWS and Azure. And I want to talk and spend a lot of time on the cloud native and agentic AI because I think that's a primary focus to a lot of companies, next to obviously the migration path away from VMware, Broadcom, and moving into your next gen platform. And we'll talk about that. So, the first thing we'll do is I'm just going to point you to this blog here. This is nutanix.com/blog. And if you go to this site, right, you'll be sent to this page here. And a lot of these announcements we're basically blogged about on our public blog too as well. So that will have the detail, which we'll kind of get into a little bit. Now, some of these aren't in order with this document here, so I'm going to talk about these things, and I'm going to show you where you can go to get more information on the blog site. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the upper left-hand corner, more external storage and compute. And we're going to talk about 3 key things. So we have been in early access with Dell in supporting Dell PowerFlex storage, and that is now generally available. So that's great news to hear that customers that have PowerFlex can now leverage Nutanix compute nodes, okay, running on PowerFlex compute nodes, connecting to Dell PowerFlex storage backend, giving you the ability to leverage your current assets. And that's really what customers have been asking as they make their decisions to move away from Broadcom VMware and onto alternative solutions. They're asking us, for us to be able to support their current investments, right? And some customers have current investments in PowerFlex, and some customers have current investments in other things, which we'll get into in a minute. Now, what I will say is, this is not the same as I have ESX and now I connect back to a third-party storage platform, okay? And the reason I say that is because we're doing things very, very smart here in a sense that Nutanix provides this really robust control plane from a consumption perspective, and we want to maintain that. And we've done that by integrating, right, our solution, which runs on CVMs. I've talked about this in episode 1 and 2 of our stream. Our controller virtual machines, right, which run our software in our control plane, as well as our vCenter-like solution called Prism Central, where you actually do the consumption. That will have direct access into the storage. Okay, so all of your VM operations, all of your data protection operations when it comes to snapshots and those things will all be done through the Nutanix control plane we call Prism. Okay, and that will make it simpler, meaning that you're not having to go back and obviously tie back into the storage solution. It's already natively there upon installation. Okay, that's one part of it. And the other announcements really around what additional storage solutions are we going to support. And the logical choice for us was really around working with Pure Storage. Okay, there's no doubt in my mind that Pure Storage is out there in force. They have a great reputation. It's funny that these two companies have matched up now with the NPS scores that we both have. If you look at our NPS scores, they're very similar, very high. And so what that means is customers love Nutanix and customers love Pure Storage. And so it just makes sense to mirror those two together, right? The ability to leverage Nutanix from a compute perspective, from a automation perspective, from a networking perspective, hypervisor, et cetera, and connecting back into Pure Storage through NVMe over TCP. Now, I want to point out that some people will talk about fiber channel and they'll say that, well, we want to keep our fiber channel. That's not true north. True north is NVMe over TCP. That's how the hyperscalers do it at scale. And that's how we are doing it with our external storage providers, right? Like Pure as an example. Okay, and you're going to get massive performance when it comes to that. Okay, the ability to leverage NVMe over TCP. And by the way, this is also coming to our native HCI storage stack as well with volumes to start. But we're talking about external storage right now, and Pure is the first that's going to be implementing NVMe over TCP with Nutanix. Now, what I will say is the Dell solution is a little bit different because we use SDC, so it's a little bit different in how that works. It's more proprietary, but in the Pure perspective, it's more NVMe over TCP. But it's going to be transparent to you, right? So if you have PowerFlex, right, the ability to connect to this storage array, set it up, and is very, very simply done through Prism. The same way it's going to be done through, with Pure Storage, all right, from an external storage perspective. Lastly, another great announcement is having a converged solution around Pure Storage with the FlashStack solution. So the partnerships between Cisco, Pure, and Nutanix will bring a FlashStack solution for Nutanix, or with Nutanix, we'll say, right, that encompasses Cisco Compute, Pure Storage, Cisco Networking, and Nutanix from a SDC, software-defined data center perspective, okay? And now you're getting a turnkey rack scale solution that you can bring into your large data centers and start consuming Nutanix at scale, okay? And making that very repeatable. And that's what large enterprises are asking for. And when I go in and talk to enterprise customers, they're looking for repeatable solutions and repeatable stacks. Now, a couple things that are not on this is some of the things we talked about and demoed day 2 around migrations, okay, and deployments. So let's talk about those two things. I know they're not on this list, but I just want to talk about those two core areas because it's very important. Number one, when it comes to migrations, the Nutanix Move tool, the migration tool that we talk about, that we use, that we have created called Move, it will support both PowerFlex and Pure out of the box, right? So today this works, okay? So there's no magic or any other secret sauce that needs to happen. However, there are two areas where Move is also helping and our customers have been asking. The first area, which is supported today, is the ability to migrate your unstructured data in files to the Nutanix file solution, or NUS solution, Nutanix Unified Storage, that has the file solution there, okay? So the ability to migrate your current filer that may be out of end of life, right, where you're going to Nutanix, such as an Isilon or a NetApp, and moving to NUS on Nutanix, the Move tool will migrate those files for you into Nutanix. So that's one area that's supported today. What is coming is the ability to migrate from NSX, those security policies, those microsegmentation policies, into our network security solution we call Flow, okay, Flow Network Security. So the ability to, when you migrate, not just migrate the VMs, but also migrate the security posture has been an ask for a while, and we're delivering that with the ability to migrate those security policies from NSX into Nutanix Flow. Okay, so that's the migration aspect and some of the announcements around that. The second thing is, I talked about the converged stack, right, with FlashBlade being a repeatable rack scale architecture, right? Converged architecture that you can bring in at a rack scale into your environment, into your data centers and your rows, right? And actually bring in rack scale architecture and have that be repeatable. Now, what customers are also asking for is, how do I get from zero to ready to consume? Okay, so zero meaning, obviously you start at zero, we started sizing, we started architecture, having these mapping conversations, integration conversations, and mapping that all out, going through procurement, and then getting gear on site. Maybe it is a FlashStack solution as an example, but that's just the infrastructure component, right? So getting infrastructure on-prem and installed is not the end of the story, as you know, to get to ready to consume. There are other things involved in that, and that is setting up users, your security policies, integrating operationally into your change management system, your NOC. Maybe you have Datadog or Dynatrace or other monitor or Grafana or other monitoring solutions that you need to integrate into from a NOC perspective, operations perspective, right? Or other things from a security perspective like CyberArk or your IPAM solution, right? How do we integrate all of those things, right, and do that in an automated fashion? And that's what this zero touch framework is. And the zero touch framework was really a services, to be all transparency, a services created solution where we customized that for specific large customers who needed to have need to get to a ready to consume model. We have some, as an example, retail. I can't tell you the name, but there is a retail that has several stores across the globe, and they want to get to ready to consume, meaning they want to press a button after things are racked and stacked. The solution is booted up, it's found on the network, and then the zero touch framework delivers a ready to consume solution where the infrastructure is ready, operations are ready, the apps that run on those things are ready. So you imagine zero touch ZTF getting all the way to app deployments and configurations, right? So that having this repeatability delivered across many different data centers, robo edge, etc. Okay, and customers have been asking for that. And so what Nutanix is doing is we're now quote unquote productizing that solution in a sense where we can deliver a ready to consume solution for you. And by the way, one thing I'll add, and one thing that was demoed, which you'll see when the demo content and the videos are ready, in day 2 they demoed drift compliance, right? So being drift aware. So actually looking at the configurations of post deployment and making sure that there's no drift. So somebody makes a change or something happens where something gets deleted by accident, it automatically detects that based on the configuration file or files that you have set up on a repository, and actually reverts those changes and make sure that your environments stay in sync and there's no drift. So that's what our large enterprises have been asking for, or customers that have multiple sites like retail, et cetera, that want to get to a ready to consume model. Okay, so I know I went a little bit beyond the first section here around external storage, but those are things that are very, extremely important to customers as they look at their next gen platforms and modernize the data center side, right? The next side of this I'm going to get into is the applications and security side. So it's no secret that Nutanix and Citrix have been a strong partner for years. Okay, matter of fact, Citrix was one of the first alliance partners, right, that supported all of their capabilities on Nutanix. And the reason why that it was is, and I know we talked about this before, is the fact that Nutanix, some of the very first use cases were VDI, and it lends itself very well to VDI, especially the HCI solution, because it's predictable. And that's what customers want. Meaning, if I know 100 users sit on a node and I know what the cost of that is in hardware and software, that I know what my scale looks like. And that predictability is very advantageous, especially in the financial aspect of it, right? So the ability to scale, knowing how I need to scale, giving that predictability, right? Giving that great performance for VDI workloads based on our architecture and distributed architecture and how we do image management, snapshots, clones, etc. All those things. VDI it still is, and was what kicked off Nutanix from a use case perspective, broadly. Okay. So what are the announcements around Citrix? So the Citrix integration is now having the Citrix plugin capability integrated into Prism Central for multi-cluster. So instead of having that Citrix plugin having to be set up and configured for every Prism element, right, which is basically a single cluster management tool, now it's integrated into Prism Central, and now I don't have to go and make sure that plugin is done at every element. And when you get into large scale VDI, you're going to have pods, right, where you're building your pods based on the limitations of the control plane, etc. So for example, say the control plane, supports X number of VMs. You're going to build your control plane, based on the limiting factor of what you're doing. Maybe it's DR, maybe it's the amount of VMs, etc. Okay, And so you'll have these pods set up when you start scaling into the tens of thousands of VDI desktops, right? And we have customers, we have customers into the 100,000 mark on VDI, right? So from a scaling perspective, that's not a problem. It's a matter of creating these different pods, not different, these same pods, repeatable pods, to give you that scale that you require. And so by doing that, right, and having all of those clusters and all those Prism elements, et cetera, now we make it simpler, right, by integrating the plugin, the Citrix plugin, into Prism Central, which is a multi-cluster management tool. The second thing that customers have been asking for is our support for formerly VMware Horizon, which is now Omnisa. As you know, Broadcom spun off Horizon post-acquisition, and now Horizon's owned by a company called, I think it's Omnisa. So Omnisa now, our customers have been asking for Omnisa Horizon support with Acropolis Hypervisor, our hypervisor, and that is coming. Okay, so that announcement is here. We're testing now. I've seen it working in lab, et cetera, and so that is coming this year. Some of the other things around the security ecosystem expansion, we list Palo Alto here because we have great, phenomenal integration with Palo Alto. From our flow network security perspective, the ability to actually, push off a deep view, right? Deep learning on your environment, packet inspection, et cetera. And we can actually send that traffic into Palo Alto virtual appliance, right? As an example. That's just one of the integration points, right? But this is another thing around a broader expansion in the ecosystem. Okay, and when I show you the blog post, we'll get into more details around what other solutions we're looking at. And large enterprises and Fed customers and government customers are asking us to make sure that we have integration into things like CyberArk, et cetera. Okay, so we'll talk more about that here in a little bit from a blog perspective. One thing I want to add on, just like we added on with the above, right, is our ability to support dark sites. Okay, so what does that mean? That means bringing all of our capabilities, right, and making sure that it's fenced, meaning these capabilities are allowed in a fenced-off environment where it doesn't have that communication back out to the internet or other sites. And so that means bringing our solutions on-prem, right, to support that. So things like Data Lens for ransomware protection, right? Today, that is a SaaS solution and cannot be run on-prem, but that's going to be brought as an option on-prem. Okay? Same thing with Nutanix Central, although it's a little bit, it's not really more around dark sites, that's more around bringing Nutanix Central, giving that option to have Nutanix Central run on-prem, right? And then have a global view of your environment, a global control plane per se of your environment, okay, versus using a SaaS solution. Some companies, and you may be one of those customers, right, that or companies or organizations that don't allow for SaaS solutions, right? And there are some companies like financials and, of course, government clients that will not allow that. But they want that capability. They need to have that capability. The ability to actually do automation around ransomware, right? So detect, respond, recover, right? That is our mantra when it comes to security. Detect, respond, recover. The ability to detect threats, respond, for example, quarantining or blocking a virtual machine or an application off from any network capability, but opening forensic capability into that environment, right? And then finding ransomware and then being able to recover that very, very quickly from a point in time from a previous snap, as an example, or a previous recovery point from another location, okay? That is how we do ransomware, and making sure, obviously, those things are immutable, right? So that's just an addition to what we're doing with security. I'll talk about more clouds here. So what does more clouds mean? Well, more clouds mean the fact that we have announced our partnership with GCP and Google, okay, and now supporting our Nutanix cloud clusters on Google Cloud Platform, okay, and now we have the ability to leverage Nutanix, or you have the ability to leverage Nutanix in any cloud, right? And that means AWS. Well, let me just say the big three. I wouldn't say any cloud because there are other clouds out there, of course. But the big three, right? AWS, Azure, and GCP. So now you have the ability to have your workloads where you need to have them at the right location, at the right cost model, in the right architecture, and giving you the ability to, if you have to, move those workloads around, right? Recover those workloads on-prem if you need to, right? Maybe there's a performance implication or a security implication that you have to do, or a cost implication where it makes more sense to run these workloads on-prem. Now you have the ability to bring those workloads back, but you also have the ability to expand your cloud adoption or accelerate your cloud adoption through moving from on-prem into the cloud as well. So that gives you this ultimate flexibility, right? And those licenses followed, by the way. So if I buy licenses on-prem and I need to move into AWS, those licenses can follow. If I buy licenses within the marketplace on Azure and I need to move some of those workloads on-prem, you can do that. And we have customers doing that today. So the ability to have this license portability and flexibility from a licensing perspective, but also from the technology aspect, being able to migrate those workloads across all of these environments, including on-prem, colo, edge, etc. The enhancements that we're talking about with AWS and Azure, let's talk about AWS, is adding an additional instance types. I think it's i7 EN instance or i7. I have to double check what that is, but it's the i7 instance type. So we're adding more instance types within AWS, and the enhancements around Azure are really about leveraging their block storage capability, right, through Elastic SAN, and attaching Elastic SAN into Nutanix to expand storage only. So today we have this in AWS where you can actually attach EBS storage to a Nutanix cluster to expand the storage footprint. So for example, maybe you need to have low compute but high storage capacity at a cheaper cost for DR, right? So for example, you have a Pilot Light solution sitting there and you don't need compute because all you're doing is replicating from on-prem or other sites to that solution, but you need additional storage capacity to accommodate those snaps and the deltas, right, of those snaps, right? And so to do that, what we're doing is allowing you the ability to attach native block storage in AWS through EBS, and that's already supported today, but supporting Elastic SAN now in Azure for the same type of attachment of block storage and expansion of storage. Okay, so the ability to do that, okay? Now let's get into cloud native and agentic AI. These were huge announcements, okay? The ability to run Nutanix storage stack, our distributed hyperconverged storage stack on bare metal on Kubernetes, okay? So we have talked about Nutanix AOS, our storage stack, or distributed storage HCI stack, right? AOS, from a VM perspective where a controller virtual machine runs on every node in the cluster. Now you have the capability of running our storage services for your cloud native workloads, for your stateful requirements, your persistent data requirements, whether it's databases or other stateful workloads, and have the ability to leverage that distributed scale out natively in Kubernetes without virtual machines. Okay, so the ability to run our CVM services, our storage services, in a pod. So instead of a CVM, think of it like a C pod, right? A controller pod, where now you have a distributed storage stack across pods, and we're still able to give you data locality through proper scheduling and those things, right, within the Kubernetes layer. Very compelling. And one of the reasons why this is very compelling is Cloud Native AOS actually includes our Nutanix data services for Kubernetes capability. What is that? And we talked about this before, I want to say in episode 5 when we talked about NKP and storage services, but really it's around protecting your data, being able to recover, right, in another availability zone or another site, right? Recover your persistent data from a DR perspective, right, for your cloud native applications. And when I mean cloud native applications, I mean containerized workloads. And I know some of you are like, well, that doesn't mean cloud native. I get it. What I'm saying is your modern applications that are running in containers, running on Kubernetes, right? Or excuse me, managed by the Kubernetes control plane. I always make this mistake, and I see this mistake happen all the time on a side note of Kubernetes containers. No such thing as Kubernetes containers, right? Kubernetes is a container orchestration control plane. That's what it is, as we know, okay? And so much more. But what I'm talking about is the ability to run Cloud Native AOS data services, or HCI, natively on containers on bare metal. We're going to be starting this with AWS. Matter of fact, it's in early access now. I think Cloud Native AOS is coming this summer from a GA perspective. And then we're going to be moving into other cloud Kubernetes solutions as supporting other solutions on-prem, like, as an example, Ranch or Red Hat. Of course, NKP, it's already it will be supported, right? All of those things, okay? And then the announcement around our partnership with Canonical, which I think is extremely important because there are customers out there that, a lot of our customers, enterprise customers, use Red Hat. Okay, let's just face it. They use Red Hat Linux, enterprise Linux, but there are a lot of customers out there looking at other distros and using other distros. Ubuntu is probably the second most popular. Okay, and so the ability to support, Ubuntu, bare metal as a solution, again, is you see what's happening here with Nutanix. I think a lot of people, I hope people are putting this together, but the reality is we've been asked to support things that we traditionally didn't support, like bare metal, right? We were a VM focused solution all along, and customers are looking for our services to be run on bare metal. And the way to do that is through containerization. All right. It's through Kubernetes. And that's how we do that. And so partnerships with Ubuntu are extremely important. Ubuntu's got a great feature called, I believe it's called Live Update. I may have got it wrong, but it's the ability to actually update your OS, right, your Ubuntu OS, without a reboot. I mean, Windows has been talking about this for I think over a decade. Oh, you're going to get to a OS level upgrade or update, right, and not have to reboot. That's not happened. Okay, there's pieces that there are certain updates, obviously, that you don't have to reboot, but a lot of updates will require a reboot. Ubuntu has this live update feature. It doesn't require a reboot, which I think is pretty remarkable. It's the ability to actually do these live updates while you're running production, no reboots, etc. Bodes very well, right? And especially for always on workloads that need to have, right, that high availability, need to always be on. Now, I know Kubernetes provides a high availability stack, right? You have replica sets and all of these things that you can create. But from an OS perspective, it alleviates a larger window for upgrades, as an example, or updates as an example. Okay. Now I'm going to end this on, not end it, but I'm going to end this section on our partnership with NVIDIA, which is extremely strong. So I've been traveling the past couple of last week. I was at headquarters, meeting with engineering on some of these things. And we had NVIDIA come in, full transparency, and we had a very good meeting with NVIDIA about the path forward and where we see the partnership. And now what I'll tell you is NVIDIA is invested. We are invested in NVIDIA, and NVIDIA is invested in Nutanix. Okay. And the reason why has to do with the enterprise AI platform, the Nutanix Enterprise AI Platform, NAI. We demoed this in the last episode. I reviewed this in the last episode. And what it is, it's that Nutanix, I think I talked about this last week. There are other companies out there that are talking about AI. Every company's talking about AI, okay? And I'm talking about manufacturing companies, software companies, et cetera, not the enterprise consumer. Enterprise consumers are definitely talking about AI. Matter of fact, 75% of CXOs have an AI initiative or thinking about AI right now. That's according to Gartner, okay? And we're seeing this play out as I talk to enterprise customers. What I'm talking about is software manufacturers. They're all attaching AI to whatever, okay? The question is, do they have a solution? Is there a product? Now, you can take a mishmash of logos and you can put that together into a chart and you can say, hey, I have a product. Mr. and Mrs. Customer, I have a product that you can consume. That's not really a product, right? Meaning that you can sell it as a product, you can market it as a product, but it's not a product, it's not a platform, okay? It's a combination of disparate things that you have to stitch together to make it work. And so operationally, that becomes a nightmare. And traditionally, to get it to production becomes a nightmare. And so you have these two things that become a problem, right? The core problem in getting it working, and the secondary problem of operationalizing that over time. What happens when you need to scale? How do you operationalize it? All those things become more complex, and now you're bringing in other folks to help do that, and that becomes overhead from a cost perspective. Nutanix has a real AI platform, okay, that is not stitched together, but is purposely built to get you to production safely and quickly for your AI workloads. Period. You saw that when I showed you the NAI solution. And if you haven't seen that episode, I suggest you go back and look at that episode because I demoed that in detail about what we're delivering there. The ability to stand up a AI endpoint, upload a model, okay, deliver that model through an endpoint, a secure endpoint using an OpenAI API, and then getting that API in the hands of a developer within minutes is extremely powerful. And operationalizing that is extremely powerful, meaning the ability to look at all of the API hits, the latency, the infrastructure utilization, who's uploading models, who has access and management and rights to do that, who's doing what from an auditability perspective. That's what operations is, right? And so we give that to you out of the box. It's already done for you. And so that's one value. The other value is what I talked about by not using an external service to do this, because every time you hit that API endpoint, you're being charged. So if you're doing it in the cloud or using OpenAI, right, APIs, right? I showed you the OpenAI demo, right, where I showed you the graph of every time my endpoint was hitting that, I was being charged, okay? Now you have the ability to not have that. You're not paying by the drip. You're buying a platform. You're using whatever models you want to use as long as you have the infrastructure to support that, and you're not being charged by the drip, okay? You have the infrastructure and it's in place. We're servicing up those models. And by the way, this is only going to get more complex when we start talking about multi-model agentic AI, okay? Because every agent is going to have its own model. You're going to have a reasoning model. You're going to have a guardrail model, which I talked about and showed you last week, or the last video, to protect your users from actually, making sure they're using your AI application correctly and ethically, right? You're going to have embedding models and re-ranking models for RAG. So all of these things you're going to need different model endpoints, different, so more infrastructure and more capability to manage that and operationalize that. Now, I'm getting to the announcement around, I know it's long-winded, getting to the announcement around NVIDIA. So NVIDIA has very smartly worked with developers out at the enterprise to understand exactly what they need. And what they found was that customers, for the most part, don't want to build these things from scratch. They want a framework and a baseline that they can build from. And what I mean by that is applications, right? So NVIDIA has released NIMS and NeMo, okay? And NIMS is really about that inferencing microservices, and NeMo is really about delivering a repeatable stack of services to get you to production quickly, okay? So let's talk about that. And I'm going to dig into this a little bit more. I'm back on the blog site, and I'm at this blog here, now available, Nutanix Enterprise AI with NVIDIA Enable Agentic AI from Edge to Public Cloud. So let's dig into this a little bit and look at this right here. So you can see here to the right-hand side, and I apologize, it's a little blurry. I want you to just look at the right-hand side of AI Enterprise really quick though, right? All these things above here contain, or NVIDIA provides now what's called blueprints, okay? So the ability to give you blueprints for for different things, different areas and different use cases. So you don't have to build your application from stack. You can use those blueprints and customize those for your use case. So if your use case is around speech and translation or biomedical or it's content generation or those types of things, you can actually leverage those blueprints, okay, and build your applications from those blueprints. At the same time, NVIDIA is taking these open source models and making them enterprise grade. So you have open source models that you can get from Hugging Face, which by the way, have open source support. Okay. And enterprises aren't looking for quote unquote open source support. They're looking for enterprise support. NVIDIA takes those models, runs them through their process, validates those models, okay, and supports them. So if something happens with the model or you have questions or you need support around models, you can actually call them and get support through your customer support agreement. So imagine that. Now you have the ability to get support for these models, which is extremely important. And then having this framework in place, right, around not just models and community models and blueprints, but also what about data? We haven't talked about this enough, and this is something that we talked about with Damon on the podcast episode. I think it was episode 7, when we brought in our AI expert locally at Nutanix and had a conversation. What does it mean to have data AI ready? That's extremely important. And NVIDIA provides tools, to actually do that, to actually look through your data, okay, and make sure it's AI ready, okay? So making sure that it's looking for bias, it's looking for proper data, repeatable data. If there's data that's already there and it's repeated, I can't tell you how many times you probably go on your file share study or your data, and you'll see the same thing, copied 3 or 4 times, right? So truncating the data that's already there in several copies into one copy is an example, right? So the simplified view of what I'm talking about, but we're basically getting data prepared to leverage, okay? And that's the beauty about some of these tools that NVIDIA has. And when those things are done, right, you're running those things on the Nutanix platform. Now, if you decide to use the full stack, and again, we have different versions of NAI. You can run natively in cloud and use cloud. And one use case for cloud, matter of fact, I talked to an internal person the other day about this. They have a customer that they don't know what they need for a lab, so they can't give anybody information on what models they want to use, what infrastructure. So what infrastructure is going to be required from that, how many users. They don't have that information. They just want to have this lab to kind of start. They want to test specific use cases and kind of start this lab and test. The cloud is ideal for that, right? Because you don't know the infrastructure. Meaning you can spin those things up and spin them down when you're done and not be charged for those things. So that's the beauty of that. Now, NAI running in that environment will help drastically from a simplification operationalizing the model capability, the model management, right? And the delivery of those model endpoints back to your developers. So NAI running on cloud, and by the way, not being charged by the drip like I talked about, right? And that's the beauty of it. But now you're using the cloud from a, I don't know what I don't know. I just need I need to stand up something. I want to test this model. I need this GPU. Well, I can just pick this GPU in the cloud and make that simple. So that's a great use case. But if you're ready for production and you know exactly what you need from an infrastructure perspective, and you know what GPUs are required, what models you're going to be using, the use cases vetted out, you can have a full stack platform with NAI running on our full stack GPT in a Box 2.0. Okay, let's just call it GPT in a Box 2.0 NAI full stack, because that's what it is. And in the full stack, I mean all the infrastructure, the GPUs, the compute, the hypervisor, the Kubernetes platform, all of those things required to build that, and not stitched together, but designed to be integrated together. And I showed you that in the demo. And we'll have more content on this because I'm very excited about this, especially as we move into agentic AI. Very, very exciting topic to really review and talk about with you all. Okay, so the ability to leverage the best of NVIDIA, right, with the platform of Nutanix, and marrying those two together and ultimately giving you a production ready platform that's safe, that's operationalized out of the box. It's already done, right? Ready for you, right? There may be some minor configuration that you have to do, but it's turnkey. And I hate using those expressions out of the box and turnkey. I just don't know how to say it any other way. It just works, right? It's like you buy an iPhone, you expect things to just work, right? It's the same thing. It just works. And this is kind of the last subject I want to talk about. But before I go, again, just the site that you want to go to get more information is the nutanix.com/blog, right? And look for the announcements that were released on May 7th, because that's when .next kicked off. And there will be, excuse me, I have a little cough today. There will be .next on tour events. I believe the first one starts in early June in New York City. That's tentative right now. But there will be .next on tour events where we'll be bringing this content to a city near you. So if you want to see this and what we're delivering, please, sign up. All right, get a hold of folks. Sometimes we'll reach out, sign up, and come to those events. They're very exciting. To me, they're just as exciting as a large .next event, because you're still be able to interact with customers. And that's what I want to leave you on. I think the most important thing about .next is not, as much as I'm an engineer and a technologist, and I love technology and I love innovation, and I'm very proud of what our engineers have done at Nutanix over the past 10 years and continue to do. It's not surprising to me, but it puts a smile on my face every time I see some of these innovations come out. Okay. But the most important thing about .next is the ability to interact with other customers. And that's why I say, if you're not interested, or not, if that's not your interest around the innovation side of it, the ability to talk to what others in your industry and what they're doing and what value they're seeing. And it doesn't even have to be Nutanix. I mean, I've seen customers talk about other things too, together, right? This is a networking event. Let's call it what it is. That's what most events are. It's about meeting people, seeing what they're doing, seeing what your competitors are doing. I mean, let's face it. I mean, your competitors are going to be at these conferences too, right? Kind of understanding and having conversations, sharing ideas, those types of things. So there's a lot of value in those things. That's why I say, if you can't make it to .next, try to at least get to the .next on tour events, which will be, like I said, in major cities across the globe, starting in the U.S. in June, I believe in New York City, early June. Hopefully I will be at that one. I live in upstate New York, so that's one of the ones I would like to be at in early June. So again, I know I said 45 minutes. I went over 3 minutes, so hopefully that doesn't push you away from joining additional sessions. Next week, we will be back at it again, getting back into Kubernetes, but getting back into the Nutanix Kubernetes platform. I'm going to I will try to get a podcast speaker to talk more about cloud native, what they're seeing in cloud native, an expert. Maybe next week, maybe the week after. And I want to get back into AI again, because I think these two areas are the growth areas. The other areas are important. I'm not saying they're not important. And there's innovation there. But the areas of growth that are going to bring most companies into the next decade are really around modern applications and AI. And by the way, AI is just another modern application. Okay, I think that's where AI typically runs in production. It runs in Kubernetes. It runs on containers managed by Kubernetes and orchestrated by Kubernetes. And the reason for that is because Kubernetes is a great orchestrator from a scaling perspective. And the integration's already there from a microservices perspective for NVIDIA GPUs, NVIDIA software, etc. And NVIDIA is not done. Everybody's like, well, NVIDIA's down, whatever. I think they're set to shock the world again when they start getting into agentic AI, robotics, and those things, and how it's really going to blow up from a value perspective. And a lot of the systems that you use in the back end from a consumer perspective are really around agentic AI and AI services being delivered underneath. A long time it's been deep learning and machine learning, and those things are still happening. For example, Netflix, your videos that you use, what genres you like, that's all machine learning, right? The recommendations they provide, it's all machine learning on the back end. So it's all algorithmic machine learning. Same thing with Amazon, your purchases, what you purchase, right? All those, same thing with your bank, your spending habits, right? All those things have been around for a while, right? So AI has been around for a while. It's just a different type of AI, right? It's machine learning. It's early AI, and then of course we have deep learning, and now we have generative AI, moving into agentic generative AI. So it's extremely important to kind of you have to get ahead of it, but at least start looking at it, because it's going to really transform what you do, how you do things in your business, and it's going to give you a competitive edge. Because if you're not doing it, your competitor's doing it. That's how you got to look at it. Okay. Okay. So that's it for me. I hope you have a great rest of the weekend. The sun is out. I'm so happy, but I have a lot of yard work to do. I know Mother's Day is tomorrow, so any mothers listening to this, happy Mother's Day. I hope you have a great day with your family and your friends and your loved ones. And I look forward to seeing you in the next stream. So have a great one. Take care.